Beyond the Scoreboard, the show that goes beyond X's and O's, but everything goes beyond X's and O's. So when we say it's a $1 trillion sports business, law, marketing, deal-making, politics, administration, it's everything. Happy Memorial Day week, and we have a lot of stuff borrowed from what you might call the beginning of the summer. Frankly, we have the NHL and NBA finals with compelling storylines in 4 different locations like none other. Segue into Mark Miles, who's talked about IndyCar, but also his experience with the ATP, bringing the Super Bowl to Indianapolis, and a whole host of other kinds of events, golf, which will cut across a variety and a diversity today like we've not had before. If you want to get a better handle on what events have happened over the last week, check out horrowsports.com. We have all of the 15 to watch, plus 5 Power of Sports, plus 5 Tech, and our friends at NBC with the top 3 every week, focusing on Mid-Atlantic, CSN, NBC. Subscribe to our Apple podcast, iTunes. Look for us on Stitcher, Google Play, Audio Boom, and a whole bunch of other places. You'll get an entire list of sports to choose from, and guarantee you'll be smarter than your average friend if you just take a little bit of time to hear and watch, listen to our podcast every week. Before we get to Mark Miles, let's talk about the 2 top issues on the horizon, the one that impacts Washington fans like never before. How about the NHL? Well, the NHL is continuing into uncharted territory. Let's just say the Capitals continuing in uncharted territory. First time in a long time after playoff heartbreak that the Capitals and Ovechkin get into the finals. And one way or another, after stellar regular seasons, the histories of the 2 teams couldn't be more different.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Vegas, the odds were 100 to 1. 200 to 1. And, by the way, twice as large as the Browns' current Super Bowl odds of 100 to 1, despite going 0-16 last season, which I would dare say is worse than any expansion team you could possibly imagine. The going ticket prices at T-Mobile Arena reflect that. On StubHub, asking prices for tickets to tonight's first home games start at $836, but a jaw-dropping $10,000. Meanwhile, Galleria at Sunset Mall marketing director Jamie Cooper said lines out the door at the 2 lid shops that sell night gear. Dicks wrapped through the store lines like a Black Friday. And the NHL needed sports fans' attention. Hopefully the league will benefit from one of the greatest stories in sports, every bit as much as the Golden Knights themselves will, and obviously the Capitals on the other side. While that's happening, a news story breaks out. Record philanthropy. Nashville Predators Foundation distributing about $600,000 to the community, 149 grants, the largest one-time donation in the foundation's history, surpassing last year's previous high of $515,000 by nearly $100,000. Nashville and Middle Tennessee-based community service and charitable organizations. The 4th year, the Predators Foundation has partnered with the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, enabling organizations to receive Predators Foundation grants to put their money toward organizations receiving big paychecks and big paybacks. Since its 1998 inception, the foundation has awarded more than $5 million in financial grants to Nashville and Middle Tennessee community service and charitable organizations. Between the grants and other charitable donations, such as player ticket programs and fundraising efforts, the foundation poured more than $1 million back into the community during the Predators' 2017-2018 season. And not to be outdone, the NHL focusing on interesting tech areas as well. The league planning to introduce a smart puck that will allow the league to track movement on the ice at a rate of around 200 times a second. The puck allows the league to better track live data, which the NHL hopes will enhance fan and broadcast experience. Coaches could also use the provided data during games, and the league's current distributed iPads would utilize the technology on the bench. The NHL currently working with Apple and SAP on the improvements. There's no doubt that sports betting will be a part of the fan experience almost across any touch point. Live streaming products will start to incorporate betting functionality, and today the foundation for what that experience is data, said the NHL's Dave Lahansky, who predicted the technology will likely be introduced and tested in 2019. The other issue is another example of corporate activation. The Kings, AEG, and the NHL partner on Blue Eco as far as NHL rinks. Joint venture with the Blue Eco Technology Group to introduce a revolutionary new Blue Eco liquid crystalline Turbex called LCT. It's an environmental technology for arenas and public facilities. They further the NHL Greener Rinks mission by bringing the technology to professional and community facilities across the globe. The proprietary liquid crystalline technology produces the highest quality of water while at the same time efficiently managing the interior airflow. The technology eliminates an arena's reliance on the municipal water systems to create and maintain its ice sheet. The system piloted at the Staples Center during this last season. So the NHL doing a whole lot on and off the ice. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the parallel successes of the NBA. LeBron, he's done it again. 8 consecutive finals appearances. And by the way, some people say, at least some of the media says it increases his likelihood of staying in Ohio this past season. We don't know that, but the bigger issue is how the NBA is monetizing and capitalizing. Most of the games' margins of victory average around 20 points, usually not too exciting, but ratings off the chart. ESPN, the highest rated game 4 for any conference finals in years. And on the other side of the ledger, the Warriors-Rockets game 1, TNT's highest rated opener for a Western Conference finals. As they move forward, one thing is certain: higher ratings, higher dollars, better future negotiations, higher salary cap, more money for players, less labor tension, higher net worth, and it's a great cycle for both the NBA and NHL. Well, spring is over. Summer's here, and if you don't think so, the 40-degree and blizzard unprecedented March turns into 100-degree unbelievable June and July, and it starts in many ways with Memorial Day, an incredible race, Indy 500. More important is the economic impact. It's the biggest city in Indiana for one day. It's the largest sporting event in the world. More philanthropy, more patriotism, and more economic impact, nearly $500 million. The architect, or at least the leader of the event, Mark Miles, now is that and so much more. He's the executive officer of the Holman Company, which includes the IndyCar Series, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and the like. His involvement, though, is diverse. He was president and CEO of Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, which was a nonprofit regional alliance of university presidents and CEOs. And in 2012, he was named the chairman of the host committee for Indianapolis, an incredibly successful Super Bowl. Before that, the Pan American Games in Indianapolis, 1987, 38,000 volunteers, the most successful staging of Pan Am Games in history, putting Indianapolis on the map as the amateur sports capital of the world. But then Mark goes international. From August 90 to 2005, he's the CEO of the Association of Tennis Professionals, the ATP. He built the ATP into a world-class organization. A sport was struggling before, but impressive revenue gains, innovative marketing initiatives, expanding his global presence through successful events in Asia, the Middle East, Latin America. And during his term with the ATP, prize money rose from $47 million to $85 million, and long-term commercial sponsorships, Mercedes-Benz and others, the ATP's premium partner in 1996. Now, the Indy 500 and all of its parts, also the IWIT tournament that happens in late August, golf tournament with Dan Tauris and Guggenheim Life, Group 1001. So Mark Miles doing it all. Here is his perspective on diversity, entertainment, and globalization in sports.
Rick Horrow inside the boardroom beyond the scoreboard at the Volunteers of America LPGA Texas Classic at the Old American Golf Course in the Colony, Texas. Get that right. Got to get all the sponsors right. It's a big LPGA event. Foray into Dallas on a long-term basis.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
Assuming this all works out, and it certainly will. And we have some national and international expertise with us. Mark Miles, president and CEO of the Holman Company. But wait, there's more. He's been ATP, brought the Super Bowl to Indianapolis, brought the Pan Am Games to Indianapolis, has been involved in so many things in so many industries. Mark, it is a profound honor to be here with you.
Thank you, Rick. My pleasure.
I'm sure it is. We have a lot of different perspectives in a $1 trillion sports business, but let's talk generally about all of your experiences kind of in one basket. The tennis, the golf now, because you were kind of a co-partner in promoting the Women in Tech Championship. We'll get into that, but obviously the IndyCar racing as well. What are the commonalities that all of those sports present? How do you succeed in running those businesses and those sports?
Well, if it's a league as opposed to an individual event, the first thing is to try to get all the stakeholders, all the constituents on the same page, aligned on and clear on what you're trying to do. Because absent that, it is herding cats, and you can't really communicate effectively, and it's really hard to be successful. So I think from a league perspective, that's first. Very important to that, obviously, is the athletes, whether it's tennis players or golfers or our drivers. In the case of the IndyCar Series, they got to know what you want to do, and you learn so much from them. So it's not It's not cramming down a strategy. It's selling a strategy and developing it over time through them. I think that's probably the main thing. But ultimately, it's about your fan base and growing fan engagement, growing the number of fans and the frequency with which they participate in your sport or take in your sport. And that's the same thing no matter where you are. And it's more and more complicated as technologies disrupt and people have more and more choices.
And specifically, let's break it down for a second. You ran the ATP for 15 years. Is tennis kind of in the same place today as it was when you started with the ATP?
No, I think they've grown a lot. Tennis is a very international sport. When I was there, I don't know the number today, but we had about 75 tournaments a year in about 34 countries. And in those days, about 85% of the business of men's professional tennis was outside the U.S. So very much a global property. I used to say it was sort of a globe wide and a micron deep because we were moving all the time. To their credit, they've taken great advantage of the ability to deliver more and more and more specific content affordably, so that, you know, there's a tennis player who's a household name in every country in the world, or most countries, and those people want to watch his match first round wherever it is that week, and now they can get it. So I think the digital media has been a great boost for tennis, and they've done great things. One of the things that you spoke earlier about was from an athlete's perspective meant a lot to me was the pension question, because a lot of athletes in tennis, it used to be that a player who made it in the top 100 in the world, half of them did that 5 years. And they really weren't always equipped to have a successful career when they weren't on a court playing other pros. So we started a deferred comp program that today is really quite important to people, and they get a benefit when they're 55 years old. So it's really gratifying for me to see them beginning to collect.
The governing structure of men's and women's tennis, has it gotten better or worse over the years?
Well, it changed when I started in 1990, and the structure is the same, and that is unusual because there's not a union. The board of directors that makes the policy and hires the CEO is half player representatives and half tournament owners. I hear, although I'm not that close to it these days, that it might be a little more unwieldy. You're not a commissioner who can, again, just cram things down. I often felt more like a prime minister than a CEO.
And just to define some of that, all four majors have different governing structures, basically, right?
From each other?
Yeah, from each other.
The four majors. It's very much like golf in that respect, except, so we would be analogous to the PGA Tour, except we were global. So it's complicated, but, we spent a lot of time aligning interests, and we maybe took longer to get a decision on policy or rules done, but I felt like when we got a decision, it was going to stick. We had built a consensus around change.
Before we get to Indy, which is a current vocation, Pan American Games in Indianapolis, Super Bowl in Indianapolis, people didn't expect, under-promised, over-delivered, tremendous process there. What's your big takeaway from that relative to special events and what they mean to a community?
Wow. Indianapolis since the late 70s has led an industry of making a community around major sporting events for the community. So it's not a new thing for me, but I think the Super Bowl, which was in Indy in 2012, was kind of the most recent proof of the idea that if we organize an event and think about it beyond the field and think about what it can do for the community and do everything we can to be inclusive and engage people. There were 38,000 volunteers, unpaid volunteers to do the Pan American Games. We thought we needed 8,000 for the Super Bowl. We got 12. And the thing about that is it lasts for lifetimes. People really revere having been involved and being part of something bigger than themselves and reflecting pride in their community. So it's really the reason to do these events from a community point of view is for the community, and it's seldom about the sport.
Let's talk about the next sport, which is you've been the head of the Hellman Sports Initiative since December of 2012, which include IndyCar racing and Indianapolis Motor Speedway as well. What is the health of IndyCar racing today?
Well, I couldn't feel better about it. The last few years, in every measure of fan engagement, fan metrics, we've had meaningful growth. There's 38% increase in our television audiences over the last 4 years, at a time when live linear television telecasts don't take growth for granted. And all the social media, really any way you can measure the sport, it's growing. We just announced for next year a new arrangement with NBC, who will broadcast. NBC Network will have 8 of our 17 races. All the rest will be on cable, NBCSN. And for the first time, we'll have a direct-to-consumer offering so that you can go online and get great IndyCar content. So that's going to ensure our ongoing growth for the next 2 or 3 years at least. And it's really exciting to be part of it. People, the sport kind of stubbed its toe through some governance matters years ago.
Very well put.
Maybe really almost broke its toe.
Or the foot.
But I think now we're wholly past that, and our fans get it, and the constituents get it, and we're all about growing the game now.
Corporate sponsorship so incredibly important as a backbone to all of those sports you were talking about before. Is it harder or easier to raise corporate sponsorship money today, and have the metrics and evaluation criteria changed?
Just the last part of that. First, I think the metrics are more important. I'm not sure that the criteria or the metrics have changed much. It's just that it's just part of the deal. You have to have an agreement on what matters to the sponsor, and you have to show them that you're delivering or over-delivering. So it's more important. I'm not sure I really believe it's more difficult. I can't remember a time in my however many years now in sports when everybody didn't feel about one great sponsor away from oblivion or from a real problem, right? If it was a tournament, they had to have that title, and if the title sponsor went away, it was a problem. If it's a player, he had to have in tennis the name of the company on the shoulder. And certainly it's sponsorship that drives the paddock and our team owners in IndyCar racing. So it's essential. It's always tough. It's very competitive. But I like what we got to sell.
Let's finally focus on what might be the most important issue, which is philanthropy. We know that in the golf industry, $4-5 billion a year is noted, a lot more based on relationships. In all sports, it's doing the right thing. We're involved in the Iowa Championship that you are partners with Dan Towers in Guggenheim in Indianapolis in August. You also see the Volunteers of America here as well. How important is
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow, the sports professor. We're going to rewind our featured interview, reset the show a little bit, and pick up from there. Here's Rick Horrow.
ESN, and for the first time we'll have a direct-to-consumer offering so that you can go online and get great IndyCar content. So that's going to ensure our ongoing growth for the next 2 or 3 years at least, and it's really exciting to be part of it. People, the sport kind of stubbed its toe through some governance matters years ago.
Very well put.
Maybe really almost broke its toe.
Or the foot.
But I think now we're wholly past that, and our fans get it, and our constituents get it, and we're all about growing the game now.
Corporate sponsorship so incredibly important as a backbone to all of those sports you were talking about before. Is it harder or easier to raise corporate sponsorship money today, and have the metrics and evaluation criteria changed?
Just the last part of that. First, I think the metrics are more important. I'm not sure that the criteria or the metrics have changed much. It's just that it's just part of the deal. You have to have an agreement on what matters to the sponsor, and you have to show them that you're delivering or over-delivering. So it's more important. I'm not sure I really believe it's more difficult. I can't remember a time in my however many years now in sports when everybody didn't feel about one great sponsor away from oblivion or from a real problem, right? If it was a tournament, they had to have that title, and if the title sponsor went away, it was a problem. If it's a player, he had to have in tennis the name of the company on the shoulder, and certainly it's sponsorship that drives the paddock and our team owners in IndyCar racing. So it's essential. It's always tough. It's very competitive, but I like what we got to sell.
Let's finally focus on what might be the most important issue, which is philanthropy. We know that in the golf industry, $4-5 billion a year is noted, a lot more based on relationships. In all sports, it's doing the right thing. We're involved in the Iowa Championship that you are partners with, Dan Towers in Guggenheim, in Indianapolis in August. You also see the Volunteers of America here as well. How important is the philanthropic aspect to corporations making decisions to go forward?
It's very important. I think fundamentally they care about reaching their customers. They also care about doing good and being seen to have a affirming effect on people's lives, which is so important, and being part of an honest, growing, robust sport. But the philanthropic side of that is very important. And I have to take my hat off to golf. I think both the PGA Tour and the LPGA Tour have done a phenomenal job of that. It's more in their DNA than maybe any other sport. For us, we get involved with lots and lots of agencies or charities, and maybe we would be better off to be a little more strategic and narrow the range of focus. But that, there's so many great organizations, and so many of our constituents have particular passions. So far, we've loved that we can turn them loose to go do what they want to do.
You're an expert at a few and knowledgeable at all of these sports. And really, when you think about the future, nobody better to ask about this. What do you think is the biggest change over the next 10 years in the business of sports?
Well, it's right in front of us, and yet it's so hard to know how it's going to work out. But it's call it what you want, AR, VR, gamification of sport. And motorsports is going to be absolutely on point on it because driving is something everybody can relate to. And driving and racing where you're not worried about injury, is compelling. So it might very well be, we see it in other major leagues now that they're creating esports leagues. Those leagues could be bigger than the real league, than the real sport. And it is changing so fast, it's just fascinating to see.
You've been around sports for many, many decades. What is next for Mark Miles?
Well, I'm going to go back to Indianapolis and get ready for the 102nd running of the Indianapolis 500-mile race. I love what I'm doing. I've really enjoyed being able to have a role in a league, the IndyCar Series, and a big event like the Indianapolis 500-mile race at the Speedway in my hometown. So I'm not planning on, I'm not looking over the horizon at this point.
Nobody's asking you to, and Indianapolis has been incredibly lucky to have had you as a steward, and more luck to come. Mark Miles, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rick.
Well, Mark Miles tells us a lot. It is interesting going into the tennis major season after the Australian. We are well into the French Open, and it is business as usual, except Andy Murray's not there. But yet he is on the business side. He's capitalized a startup that is called Deuce. It's a new startup app which makes it easier for those of us who are tennis fanatics to play more, matching players of any age or ability to local tennis access, be it coach-led sessions or courts at clubs or parks. Tennis is such a great sport, Andy says, but we simply don't have enough people playing. We need to fill empty courts with people playing more often, and Deuce uses today's technology to do this in a simple, welcoming, and affordable way. Launched in May, Deuce has over 70 clubs and parks in and around London by the end of July, and obviously the synergy is the announcements around Wimbledon. Murray clearly is investing his energies into his post-playing career, and don't be surprised if he announces his retirement after 2018. Nobody said so, but take a look at what he's trying to do, and obviously tennis is important, but he goes way, way, way beyond tennis. One comment about baseball, and then we'll get into it more as we head into the All-Star Game preparation in Washington. MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred stands behind his opinion that the league should receive an integrity fee based on the total amount of money wagered on professional baseball. He said it would be below a point. And as the Supreme Court said, you can go ahead and introduce state legislation in all 50 states. The integrity fee percentage remains up for negotiation and very well could vary from state to state. No uniformity. Rob Manfred indicates that the legalization should be focused on legislation that has a positive impact on baseball's overall viewership, despite the negative connotations often associated with gambling. He says fan engagement is a big upside in this, and I don't see our sport being a direct participant in gambling at any point, but everybody recognizes that sports betting can be a source of fan engagement, and we're going to capitalize on that opportunity. He's been watching actions of other leagues. Adam Silver wants a point. Roger Goodell wants to wait. Rest assured, there will be remuneration. This is the beginning of a chapter in a very long book. How about the NFL? Let's talk about a couple of things. It never sleeps. First of all, they officially will host the 19 NFL draft. According to the Nashville Tennessean, the vibrant and booming city beat out Cleveland Canton. Vegas, Kansas City, and Denver to win the bid. Nashville currently on a hot streak from a media and entertainment perspective, the NFL draft being the most recent victory for the city, coming after being awarded an MLS franchise, the NHL Predators exploding in popularity, cementing its reputation as a global destination for music fans. Specific venues and sites for hosting the weekend of festivities and the draft not been announced, but the city's event marketing fund committee is considering a proposal to commit $1 million to promote the event. The draft has become a weekend-long festival and celebration of football in recent years, proving to be an economic boom to the host cities. And the 2017 draft in Philly resulted in an economic impact of nearly $100 million of economic impact in all for the city. Well, that's the good news. The other news is the ongoing controversy that seemingly won't go away. The NFL season stemming from player protests and the national anthem. Team owners have decided to give each franchise the authority to set their own rules on the issue. The Washington Post says different ideas and potential solutions were circulated amongst owners, including one that involved clearing the field of all football personnel while the anthem is played. But the new policy means the league current requirement for all players to be on the field won't be the top issue. It isn't over yet. The announcement followed by loud and predictable backlash on both sides. Expect the controversy around the issue to continue well after September season kickoff. It's not something the NFL had in mind, but it is something that's going to happen. Let's end with international and domestic soccer. Obviously, DC United, not a great season, but certainly a great season off the field with the announcement of Audi Field. But it follows soccer being front and center everywhere. How about starting with Kiev, a great European Champions League final? Liverpool signs a New Jersey sponsorship with Standard Chartered Bank. How about that goal? That was just incredible. Even those of us who don't follow soccer followed a tremendous bicycle kick by Christian Bale. New 4-year, $214 million deal set to run through the 2022-2023 season and comes as a bet of $14 million increase yearly, $53 million on an annual basis from this sponsorship alone. Standard Chartered, 1,000 branches spread across 60 global markets, initially signed on as Liverpool's main kit sponsor in 2010, taking over from Carlsberg. And 8 years later, this is now the second largest sponsorship and across the club's history. Liverpool's global reach, having substantial fan base across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, and has proven its worth when it comes to attracting sponsors. That's a big deal nationally and internationally. Close to home, we follow MLS moving forward in a number of different contexts. The MLS seems to be focusing on Cincinnati as its next MLS.
We're going to take a short break, but when we return, more Rick Horrow, the sports professor. Welcome back to Beyond the Scoreboard with Rick Horrow. We pick up right where we left off.
MLS franchise. We've talked about Nashville, but the MLS seems to be ready to announce its major deal with Cincinnati. Nippert Stadium seems to be a short-term home. Nashville obviously made the commitment for what it's going to be doing, but it looks like Don Garber and others are focusing on how to make sure that FC Cincinnati set to make its leap to the MLS. CEO Carl Lindner, FC Cincinnati Mayor John Cranley, and others preparing. As soon as 19, the league mandates that all new soccer teams have soccer-specific stadiums. Still in the works for Cincinnati, but the team expected to continue play at Nippert while the new stadium being built. Club plans to build a $250 million stadium on the present site of Stargell Stadium behind Taft High School, while also building a new Stargell Stadium for $10 million as pledged. Combined with the $150 million expansion fee, FC Cincinnati seems poised to shell out more than $400 million to join the MLS. Clearly believing in the model, believing in the product as well. Well, I think we've covered as many sports as you possibly can as we begin the summer. Stay warm, everybody. It's a lot easier to do. We'd like to thank Mark Miles for lending his perspective. Like to thank Dan Martin and Tanner Simpkins for helping to put this podcast together. And we'd like to thank you for listening and watching the video side of all of this as we move forward into more baseball, getting closer to the summer, NFL draft, NHL and NBA finals finalize, and we're looking at other issues well beyond this fall, summer, ready for fall NFL training camps to open. Bottom line is more sports than ever before. Sport industry, $1 trillion, never sleeps. Sports professor Rick Horrow, Beyond the Scoreboard. See you next week.